Hello and warmly welcome to 105th episode of our SAP on Azure YouTube podcast. Today is August 11, and together with Robert and Holger, we are here to talk everything related to Microsoft and SAP. Hello. So SAP implementation and migration, they're quite complex process. Now, many customer and partners, they try to repeat something what other did. And try to repeat the stuff that actually work. And in this case, then we are coming to something which is called best practices. Today's topic is basically will be about the best practices about SAP on Azure on Oracle database, DBMS system. So Oracle is a complex database, a lot of screws are there. And we are lucky today to have Cameron Gardiner, I would say a legend from the SAP on Microsoft guy. Many people know him about. He had a very popular blogs and white paper in the past. So he will give us more detail about his learnings about SAP on Oracle on Azure. Now, before we go to deep dive into the topic and discussion with the Cameron, let's just quickly check it. What's the news from the last week? So one of the first blog is basically, and one very interesting from Dennis Padia from engineering team about central services HA Cluster on Linux and the DR scenario using Azure Site Recovery. Now, I don't know, Cameron, how's with you, but basically I see a lot of customers who are actually doing not just an HA, but real demand in a DR in another region, and a DR, they also want an HA on the other side. So
Sure. So this is really great news for a lot of customers. So until recently, we didn't have a good solution for the shared storage that the ASCS requires. So as you know, we can use Azure Files, NFS, we could use ANF, but this required quite a bit of rework and replumbing after a DR event. I don't think we've got time to go through all of it here, but you take a look at Dennis's blog. I think it's really excellent, really good news.
And I love when I see such a diagrams. I love it. So basically, he's describing SLES version with iSCSI target server as a DRBD devices. He's replicating all the VMs using Azure Site Recovery. Of course, what is left, as you mentioned, the shared stuff. Like so, he's describing here how to do with the Azure NetApp or the Azure NetApp cross-region replication parts. And people can check in the detail. I would also say, because he's not describing, let's say, how to do with the Azure files, because there is no built-in replication yet, so to say, cross-region replication. Maybe just as a tip to remind from Ross, he was describing how to kind of have manual way how to using an rsync and how to set up the rsync to replicate the NFS volumes. So that might be also an option to do something similar. And if they would use Azure files, okay, that might be a way to go, right? Now, another very interesting stuff, you know, when we talk about the Wolf, and the Wolf is here in the office, from Cameron, from you, for me, really super interesting stuff about actually optimizing the network throughput on a Linux, and how to, you are talking, of course, about the context of HCMT, SAP tool for the network benchmarking, but the point is also about generally optimizing the network tuning on a Linux.
Yeah.
which can be useful, okay, not just for the scale out, but again, okay, Oracle as an example, which use, or HANA, which use NFS, networking storage, so to say, right? So
Yeah,
maybe yeah.
This blog became a topic after several customers reported during scale-out validations that they received fail results. The screenshot you see on Goran's screen, this is a test lab system. It's not a customer system, but you can see a typical fail pattern. And we saw this consistently, so we dug into this and had some interesting results. So first thing, this applies to Azure M-Series and MV2. This wouldn't be necessary on smaller VMs like D and E series. The actual mechanics of what's happening driving the network cards is rather complex.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have time to go into that here. I would encourage customers to use Nmon and use KSAR and take a particular look for very unbalanced and asymmetric CPU patterns. Sort of thing we're looking for is the first NUMA node being very, very busy and other NUMA nodes being very idle.
Yeah.
I document the process, how to pin processing onto NUMA node 0. And yeah, if anyone has any feedback on this, very welcome to post a message.
Super.
And just a caution, make sure to do some benchmarking before and after. There are a lot of variables in the mix here, and I wouldn't want the configuration we have to cause a performance regression. It shouldn't. We've never seen that. Please do it before and after.
Right. But basically, if I figure out correctly, the point is CPU is used also for managing the networking, of course, and the same CPU would be used by database. So we here we could have that same networking processes, and let's say the database would use the same CPUs, which might lead to the bottleneck and cause the performance issue both on the networking as well as on the database. So basically what you're doing, you're pinning or fine-tuning the CPU for the networking to use the NUMA 0, and the rest, and then the database wouldn't use it, NUMA 0, but the rest.
With this configuration, the database will continue to run on NUMA 0.
Okay.
Just a small correction. NUMA node 0, typically logical processor 0 and 1 are heavily used for other kernel type processes. So we also exclude 0 and 1.
Okay.
This is a conversation that if we go too much further, gets really, really complex.
Yeah, might be a separate topic actually.
Yeah,
I believe.
I would encourage customers to just do testing, follow the procedure, repeat the testing, and testing with iPerf or HCMT, whatever tool you prefer. HCMT is a good tool. And if and when we need to go deeper on this, but when I was actually writing this blog, I had to be pretty careful because we have to make sure that a good 70–80% of our customer base can understand and work with this topic.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah. So let's switch to another update. There is cost update is always in cloud and in Azure, of course, super important for SAP customers as well. Here they are kind of introduced the new cost details API, and it's also kind of which comes with the many benefits, so to say, in scalability and security and this basically new cost detail update. It's kind of because it's general available, it will replace the old usage detail and a consumption APIs, which are kind of in the maintenance, and they will not receive the update. So they are urging here to migrate to the new APIs. Interesting for me also one kind of feature, filtering caused by tags. Tags are kind of generally a lot of used for the different purposes, just to label it. People do not know exactly what's running inside, but here when they are doing a tagging and collecting those tags for the different information, now it makes sense absolutely to filter those caused by the tags as a kind of feature. And they're also talking about the new cost management labs, basically where you can also see all those features. So they're kind of just listing, which is quite nice. Talking about also the anomaly detection alerts, different feature. Basically, everything is kind of prepared for you to try. And also talking about new videos and learnings as well. Interesting is that they are also adding in the Bicep those features to create the Azure budget. Bicep is a kind of like ARM templates, templates to deploy the stuff. Bicep is a kind of a new version of ARM, a kind of simplified version, something like Terraform. So interesting also that through the Bicep you can also create an Azure budget as well. Now, maybe last but not least, a little bit Holger's part, the Microsoft Cloud Artificial Intelligence Developer Service. It's announced as a kind of leader in the Gartner quarter. For me, which is kind of quite interesting here statement is that they are telling that that many software engineering teams still need AI capability that do not need the advanced machine learning skills. So typically those AI stuff are very much related to the data science, and data science is special guys. So if the cloud service can simplify this, I see really as a huge opportunity. And of course, all this AI stuff could be combined in addition to the different SAP PaaS integration. All right, so let's switch to the core topic of SAP on Azure on Oracle topic. Cameron, to you, can you please warmly welcome once again, and can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Cameron Gardiner. I'm a principal architect in Azure Compute Development. I've been at Microsoft about 15, 16 years, originally joining SQL Server team many years ago, working on our database platform, eventually moving into a team when the focus moved to Azure. Moving into a team focused on all of the DBMSs that SAP support. And one very important database in the SAP world is definitely Oracle. And
yeah.
we have a large number of large multinational customers moving their SAP on Oracle systems to Azure. And I really have to thank our partners at Oracle for their tremendous help and support that they provide to us to make the objective here is to make running SAP on Oracle, on Azure, the best and first class experience of any hyperscaler, and to match and exceed what customers achieve in their on-premises data centers.
And the good stuff on SAP on Oracle is they can run both on Linux and Windows as well.
That is correct.
Yeah.
At the very end of the presentation, I have a short piece on Windows, but most of this presentation is actually focused on Oracle Linux. Oracle Linux is what maybe 90% of our customers are gravitating towards, and I'll go through some of the reasons there. So we'll cover off the top 12 recommendations. We'll focus a bit on storage and some changes to our guidance in this area. Some really important points around VM sizing and considerations. And point number 4 is where we'll give some real-world feedback from actual customers around some of their configurations, what they've done, what they have working. One of the feedbacks from our customers is that Oracle is an incredibly configurable database, and they want to know what is an optimum solution that will run on Azure. Now, we could go back to our many multinational customers all around the world and build unique one-off custom-built solutions for hundreds, thousands of different customers. But that is not good for customers. It's not good for Oracle support, and it's not good for our support. The whole idea behind this presentation, and there are coming updates to the SAP on Oracle documentation. The master SAP Oracle Azure note is currently being updated. The whole idea behind this is to adopt a much more uniform, simplified model for deployment. And that's what point number 4 is going to focus on. Then
so basically less choice, but more stability, right?
Yeah,
or less recommendation in choice, let me say so.
Yeah, let's just say I would say to any customer on any platform, stay with the crowd, stay with the herd. You know, yes, can you engineer a highly complex, highly tuned Oracle deployment on Azure? Can you do this? Absolutely. Is that really the best thing to do? And I would say from experience, it's much better to stay with a proven solution. A saying in English is it's better to walk a well-trodden path than to go and cut your way through a new path. So we finish up with a few words on Windows and where to find more information. So a lot of content here. So Goran, jump in at any time. So SAP on Oracle is only supported on Oracle Linux or Windows. So it's not supported on SUSE. It's not supported on Red Hat. Having said that, we get tremendously positive feedback about Oracle Linux from customers. We don't have any complaints there. Latest version is 8.6, and if you look out there for support articles, you'll see that older versions of Oracle Linux, old versions of Oracle 7, Oracle Linux version 7, with very old kernels, these had problems with things like accelerated networking. All of this is now fixed, all completely fixed, where this is not a problem anymore. But still, it remains our recommendation. Click on the hyperlink. Goran, you're going to make these slides available?
We will upload them, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I would also say, I mean, basically, if they also deploy the latest version, they do not, and not the previous version, they do not need to do any kind of upgrades, which is an activity, right? Might even become a project. So you're optimizing also your future operational part of the SAP.
Yeah, extending your life and less change in
Exactly,
environment.
extending the life. Correct. Yeah.
So just a note, Oracle Linux comes with two kernels. It has the Oracle Unbreakable kernel and it has a Red Hat compatible kernel. So we do all the testing and validation that Microsoft does on our side and our friends at Oracle do on their side. That is all done using the Oracle Unbreakable kernel. So I'd really recommend to use that the Unbreakable kernel. We do get questions about this because there's quite a lot of Red Hat expertise out there, but I have never come across a Linux admin who has anything other than positive words about Oracle Linux. And of course, there's a real support advantage to having the operating system, the database, all of the middleware, ASM, etc., is all shipped from Oracle. So, Oracle database versions. Sometimes we come across really, really old Oracle systems out there. Oracle 19 is a great database. Latest patch 15. Yeah, definitely that is the one to move to, and a lot of customers are doing a database upgrade as part of their move to Azure. Now, I would really encourage that. So use the move to Azure as a chance.
I guess sometimes they might have an older SAP releases that support maybe a lower version, but if they don't do an SAP upgrade, which probably they won't, it's definitely advisable to double check the SAP product availability metrics and see the support for the higher version of the Oracle, and always use the highest, ideally, as you mentioned, Oracle 19.
Yeah.
Right.
So at Azure, we do support Oracle 11, all of the 12 versions and Oracle 18, but please try to get to Oracle 19. That would be my comment. Now, I put the note in there for the latest SBP, SAP bundle patch. Please take the latest ones there. Number 3 is a big change for some customers. Automatic storage management. We have been heavily promoting this in our customer base, and I have to admit there are some customers out there who've never seen it, never touched it, never used it, and the Oracle DBAs tend to be quite nervous about this, but each and every single Oracle DBA who's moved to ASM has said, we should have done this years ago. It's all advantages moving to ASM. Everything from performance, reliability, resiliency, not to mention administration. I will give one advantage. Some customers out there have quite large, complex LVM deployments, maybe many disks. When their database grows and they run out of space, what are the options? You can either try extending the existing LUNs, or you can try adding another disk into that LVM. Most of those options are not really that great. And adding another disk to an LVM does not restripe the data. So you have to rebuild the LVM if you want to proportionately and evenly distribute the data across all of those disks. With ASM, if we have time, I can even show the commands, but there's a very simple command just to add a new disk in, and ASM will rebalance the data across those disks.
So basically in Azure, let's say if they would use a premium storage, they would use a multiple disk. Typically, they would use LVM to stripe it to get more size, more performance. But ASM is actually an Oracle management system. So you, as far as I know, you you add those raw disks to the Oracle, and Oracle is a kind of LVM from the database perspective handling.
Yeah, I guess you could think of it that way. It's far more efficient and performant. I mean, XFS and ext4, these are general purpose file systems. ASM is heavily optimized for DBMS workload.
Right. Yeah.
So from any one of the metrics that I mentioned, the performance or administration, moving to ASM in any one of them justifies it. But Oracle have been using ASM with their engineered systems, their Exadators, for many years. And our Oracle partners, they tell us ASM is absolutely the way to go. It should be the default choice for SAP on Oracle on Azure.
Yeah, but then behind could be a different storage from the Azure side, right? Behind the ASM as well. So
yeah, well, point number 4, we recommend to consolidate on premium storage SSD, or if customers out there, if anyone's interested, please contact me. Please contact Goran or I. If anyone has a non-production Oracle system and they want to test premium storage SSD version 2, please contact us. We do have other storage types with Azure, but my comment at this time would be follow the crowd, follow where everyone else is heading, follow where the focus is, and the focus is premium storage SSD and SSD v2. Don't invest into the other storage types. Another benefit of ASM is depending on your requirements, you can remove the mirror log. We have customers who have deployed configurations like this. Azure Premium Storage, of course, gives you 3 independent copies of storage. So, I mean, this isn't an Azure lesson, but Azure Storage doesn't have RAID. We just keep 3 independent copies of it. So In ASM, you can select external redundancy and have no mirror log. We'll come back to this topic. There are other options. For customers who are using ASM, please use ASM lib. Do not use UDEV. UDEV, the only reason I know of, I'm sure someone else out there will be able to correct me. The only reason I know why you would use UDEV is in on-prem scenarios where you have multiple SANs. That would be the only scenario. But ASM lib is Oracle provided, Oracle supported, Oracle tested. So please use it. Now on Azure, we have another storage type called Azure NetApp files, which is very popular, particularly for absolutely gigantic customers over 100 terabyte. And Goran can probably tell everyone the reason why NetApp becomes very popular with these huge systems is the enterprise features that NetApp has in regards to snap copy and snap restore are really pretty impressive. So
I had actually one customer, a huge one. They were doing migration and doing those export import, which of course makes a huge pressure on the storage and creation of the database, and they forgot to enable the Oracle DNFS. And they complain,
goodness.
yeah, and they complain about the performance when they enable it. It was something like, I think 7 times faster.
Yeah,
which made a huge difference in the downtime context of the migration, for example. And of course, those benefits are during the normal runtime, of course. But it did make a huge difference, definitely.
So for those customers who have very large Oracle databases, or customers who have a lot of investment into NetApp in their on-prem data centers, this is a great option. If someone's familiar with NetApp and all of the tooling and instrumentation around NetApp, this is a great option. Oracle DNFS is their direct NFS. There's another option called kernel NFS, which is the native NFS that comes with your Linux distribution. DNFS is faster for 2 reasons, maybe more than 2, but we'll focus on the 2 largest. One, it's running in user mode, so it avoids the context switching between kernel and user. And the second reason is that it opens up multiple TCP sessions between the database server and the NetApp. So the equivalent,
optimizing,
yeah. Well, you can really only get maybe 1.3 gig per second through one TCP session due to other limits. And the way to improve that is just to open up more parallel sessions. So for kernel NFS, you use a feature called NConnect to do that. Typically wouldn't go sort of any higher than 8 on NConnect, but Oracle DNFS that handles all of this automatically, fully automatic.
Cool. Yeah.
So we'll come back to Oracle DNFS later in this session. Now, we've had some of these large customers move on to M192 MS VMs with 4 terabytes of RAM. And Historically, we find a lot of Oracle DBAs are very conservative in sizing the SGA, and this is really due to a lot of history dating back many, many years, and it's certainly nothing that applies to the latest versions of Oracle Linux or the latest versions of Oracle Database. So we have customers out there running fantastic performance, super stable, huge page size. The number of huge pages is set to approximately 75% of physical RAM, so in this case 4 terabytes, and the SGA is 90 to 95% of the huge page size.
Yeah.
And
I guess I guess in the past we didn't have such a huge machines with a lot of RAM.
yeah,
So
and
probably that habit comes from that time, smaller sizes.
yeah, and so number one, if you try creating a huge SGA and you don't have huge pages, I believe there can be some horrible problems with that. Historically, in very old versions of Linux and very old versions of Oracle Database, I think there were some problems, but I can say these issues are solved now. And really, when it comes to sizing your SGA, you should be looking in your AWR report.
Right.
You know, don't follow what two guys from Microsoft on YouTube say. Look in your AWR report. It's all there. I would follow the AWR. So we will briefly touch on AWR report later if we have time. Oracle Home, please put it on a separate disk. Don't put it on your root disk. And number 10 is probably if people take nothing away from this session other than point number 10, I will be very happy. Please don't use tiny boot disks on Azure. This is the source of many performance escalations and performance problems. I'm probably going to write a blog about this, how to diagnose this problem. But if you're on a large E-series, or if you're on any M-series, P10 should be the absolute minimum.
What would you, I remember, from the previous time, those small disks causing performance on the data disks. What is from your experience? Let's say you said minimum is P10. We also, I think, documented P10 in our documentation. What would be the optimum? I mean, this is just the one disk, they are premium, they are not extremely expensive, especially when you compare them to the data disk. There's much smaller sizes, but so they wouldn't waste too much money if they increase the OS disk. But what would be your kind of recommendation for the, let's say, a good size that is higher than P10, which could be kind of called maybe a optimum or good size?
So if I was an SAP basis admin again, I had an M128 or larger, I would be using P20 as an absolute minimum. If I had a D32 V5, I would have P10 as an absolute minimum on either Windows or Linux.
Linux, yeah. Okay.
Either way. Accelerated networking, as mentioned, if you're on Oracle Linux 7, please contact us. Whatever, we'll work out a way to get on the latest version of Oracle Linux. should be moving off 7. So yeah, there are known issues with the integration services for Azure, accelerated networking. It's best just to move off Oracle Linux 7, get on to 8.6. So the documentation for SAP on Azure that's on the docs.microsoft site is going in the next week or so, will be completely refreshed and will reflect what's mostly in this presentation. And the note that our partners and Oracle team maintain, this is also going to be refreshed within the next few days. So there will be some large changes. And as mentioned, there are a lot of different configuration options. There are a lot of ways to do things with Oracle. The whole intent is to have some regular patterns that fit 99.9% of customers and are safe and supportable and highly performing. And there is a very large weighting put on simplicity as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of info in the previous slide. Any question, Goran?
But basically, a lot of info. But you know, I always say when I talk to some of my Oracle friends, you know, like Oracle has 1,000 screws, but they said yes, but you can tune it. You know, okay, which creates increase the complexity and increase the possibility of doing something wrong. These information are super valuable, you know, exactly. And as you mentioned, just follow the path that other went, and it's proven that it works, and you will be on a good side. So
yeah,
excellent, yeah.
And for example, point number 6, UDEV. We discovered during a deployment, if you use UDEV, which you can use, you have to set your block size to 4K. If you don't, you get log corruption. And the reasons for that are complex, probably too long for us to go through. But if you use ASM lib, you'll never have that problem. So we have hundreds of customers out there running successfully without any issues. I would really encourage people to follow the safe, proven path. The intent behind the documentation refresh that my colleague Ralph and I have been working on is to put in place a set of clear patterns to follow.
How would you, just one question, if somebody needs to decide on what storage would they use? So meaning you have a today premium SSD versus the NetApp and upcoming premium SSD version 2. So what could be a kind of maybe, if we ignore the prices now, what could be the technical maybe reason why somebody could choose this way or that way?
I would say NetApp has some real strengths around the backup and recovery and the cross-region replication features. These are really impressive, and we do see a pattern whereby the largest customers we have appear to gravitate towards NetApp and use DNFS. Having said that, our premium storage development team are always improving and lifting and enhancing and getting better all the time. And you know, we have Azure Backup, Snap support for Oracle ASM, that's already there.
Correct. Yeah.
I don't think it's a question we can give a very
straightforward
blunt,
answer.
straightforward answer. I think if you're a really large customer, in the 100 terabyte range, I think NetApp starts to have some pretty attractive features. If I was a customer between 1 to 50 terabytes, I think premium storage has some cost advantages, and I think we see customers gravitating towards premium storage.
Yeah.
Okay, good question. But so the two recommended patterns are now ASM and DNFS. We do not recommend customers continue with LVM and file systems. We strongly recommend, as part of any move to Azure, that they migrate to ASM. The documentation that I've been working on contains training and links for the DBA to cross-train and learn ASM. Your performance will be better, support will be better, and administration much easier. And you have the option to improve reliability with the ASM normal redundancy feature, and switching off the mirror log and using normal redundancy is going to save IOs as well. So ASM recommended for development, QA, and production, small, medium, and large databases. It's not a case of you only need to use ASM for large databases. Not at all. It really should be the default. As mentioned, ASM lib, not UDEV. UDEV has, if you use UDEV, and I don't know the reason why you would, you have to have a sector size and logical sector size of 4K. So number 3, as mentioned, Azure Premium has built-in triple redundancy. So your ASM disk groups generally use external redundancy. The SAP note 888626 says that if your storage system has all of the enterprise features like multiple paths, battery backup of caches, all of this, and Azure Premium Storage has all of this, then you have the option to only have one log, no mirror log, and to use external redundancy. If you wanted additional safety, you can select normal redundancy, and ASM will, it's more complex, but you can think of ASM as doing software RAID, that scenario.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
So there's a very old document out there for ASM for SAP systems, and in that document they have 3 variants for ASM disk groups. And what we've done is taken those, modernized them, shared them with our Oracle partners, and got their feedback. And we're going to go quickly through those in a minute. The Oracle ASM allocation unit size, 4 megabyte is the default. if you had a very large BW system, that can be increased, and OLAP systems could get some benefit. But that would be something I would recommend discussing with Oracle in the first instance. As mentioned, ASM sector size, leave it as default, unless you're using UDEV, but please don't use UDEV. Really, if you do not set the logical sector size to 4K, the log will be corrupted. There's a kernel fix that might have been introduced. A question that comes up quite a bit is Azure disks have host cache. So what cache option should I set for ASM disk groups? And based on experience, the data disk group can be read-only or none. During R3 load migrations, performance might be better if it's set to none. And some customers do run with none for data. All the other disk groups probably set those to none.
I guess read-only is definitely benefiting the reading cache. If they need to read something more frequently, you can then it fast and you get more basically IOPS and throughput than the premium disk can achieve actually, right? So might be, and also thinking about maybe it's an interesting, yeah, when you do a migration, you're more kind of writing.
Yeah, and SAP R3 load migration is a very, very atypical operation for a database to ever do.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
But it's usually you only do it once.
Yeah, and that's always maybe good to distinguish best practices for the normal runtime, and maybe a kind of deviation for the migration, because typically whatever we say, it's more for the runtime. Maybe we could, I'm just thinking loud, maybe we could also give some kind of recommendation for the migration if they do an export import. As an example, put cache of data disk to none, and maybe latest then afterwards for the runtime, for the normal OLTP, of course, read only can make sense. Something like it, just as an idea, because people are kind of also a bit confused. You know, why do you recommend us during the migration? This is not written in the documentation. Documentation is generally reflecting normal runtime best practices, right? Yeah.
So simple message from this slide, ASM, there's so many advantages and then no disadvantages, and each and every customer where we have introduced ASM, and sometimes we've had to get our friends at Oracle to help push this as well. Each and every single one of those customers has said they should have been on ASM years ago. So I can only recommend that customers look at this really closely. So we'll go very quickly through ASM Variant 1. This would be for dev, QA, and very small systems. So we would have 3 ASM disk groups, and each of those disk groups having 3 to 6 P30 disks. And if you run out of space, just simply add in another P30 disk. There's a one-line command using the ASM utility. If we have time, I'll show you this. That'll add in another 1 terabyte, and then ASM will go and rebalance, handle everything for you. You don't have to do anything. Now, if you compare that to the LVM scenario, there's really no comparison. And on top of that, performance on ASM is going to be better. The archive log disk group, typically 2 P20s, and reco there. So moving to ASM Variant 2, here we start adding in and separating the log. And this is really designed for sort of up to a database size 3 to 12 terabytes, so not particularly large systems. Again, we're still using just P30 disks, between 3 to 12 of them. And to increase DB size, add additional disks. It's much. Technically, is it possible to increase the size of an existing disk? So change one of those P30s to a P40. Can you do that? And as you know, online disk expansion is a feature that's coming. Please don't do it. Please don't just. It's nothing to do with Azure. If this was on-prem and you were resizing a LUN, I would say exactly the same thing. Don't do it. Just add another LUN, in this case, add another P30 disk into the ASM group and let ASM rebalance the data, which we'll do in the background transparently.
Yeah.
And that's...
And of course, all those disks that are part of the same ASM has to be of the same size. So if they use P30, they should continue with the P30. They shouldn't add, I guess, P20 or P40.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But the whole intent behind this YouTube, the rewrite of our documentation, is we put a high weighting on simplicity. And if you were to ever start mixing up disk types, that's really creating a lot more chaos rather than order. So please don't do that. Okay, so for really big systems up to, eventually 50 plus terabytes, we're looking at eventually moving into P40 disks, possibly even P50s. Obviously, Azure VMs have limits on the number of disks that can be presented to them, but for the larger VM SKUs, that's 32 or more. Here we introduce the possibility of having additional safety on your Oracle transaction log, and by using normal redundancy for the ASM group. Now, the criticality of a system is going to determine whether this is something you do or not. We would argue that Azure Premium Storage is as reliable, as resilient as any storage system that's out there today. So
great. Okay.
Moving forward.
And these are questions what customers and partners are asking. How can I size it? What disk types could be, depending on the database size? What should I use for data, log, archive, and then, right? So super.
Yeah, so this gives a guide. Obviously, if somebody had a BW system that had a lot of very long running transactions and consumed a huge amount of log space, that you would obviously increase the size of your disk group for logging. So this is a guide, but these are the SKUs that you should be gravitating towards.
Okay.
So NetApp Files is popular at our very top end. We have an excellent blog written by Ralph, who is our NetApp champion. I think Ralph has been on this YouTube channel 2 or 3 times.
Few times,
Yeah.
yes. He loves it, and we also.
Yes. Yes. So I don't think I can say too much more above what Ralph already has. So I think you should put the links to Ralph's YouTube sessions.
We will do it as well.
Into the links page.
Good point. Yeah.
And his blog is very good as well. I'd also point out the technical reports, the TRs. So this is like a Microsoft KB or a SAP OSS note. They're called TRs, technical reports. Those are really good. So
they're from NetApp.
Yes, yes. So the 2 of them linked below. A mirror log is always required with DNFS, and although it is technically possible, it is not supported to have ASM on DNFS for SAP. So technically you can do that, but again, the whole idea behind what we're doing here is we have, if you're on Linux, you're using ASM, or you're using DNFS directly, those 2 patterns, and we have hundreds and thousands of customers, all with very similar deployments, and that allows us to test and document and improve the quality of our what we deliver to customers. So Azure VM sizing for SAP on Oracle. So all our Azure VM types have defined performance envelopes for CPU, disk, network, and memory. Those limits are documented with the links below. So a couple of points. It's very important that your VM type has sufficient throughput in IOPS, at least equal to the aggregate of your disks. Otherwise, you've engineered a system where the IOPS and the throughput of the disks exceeds that of your VM, which means it will never be used. In the past, we didn't have bursting. A lot of our fleet now has bursting, and I am releasing a blog hopefully in August where I explain the topic of disk bursting and VM bursting and paid bursting, because there's quite a bit of confusion in our customer base about this. My next SAP General Update blog is nearly finished and nearly ready to go. Those of you who follow our blog site. I will cover bursting, but I would say it's especially useful for the log disk on Oracle, so consider that. One thing to consider for ANF is that ANF counts as network, not as disk. So because NFS is a network protocol, the disk quota is not so relevant. It's your network quota.
Yeah, I think sometimes here comes maybe the confusion, you know. Azure VM has a dedicated IOPS and throughput for the storage. Storage mean premium disks and the network. But when it comes to ANF, ANF is a network storage, so you have to actually, from a storage perspective, take into account the networking throughput limits, not the storage limits, right? And this is sometimes which might people are maybe confusing or forgetting, maybe, yeah.
So the next time you have Ralph on this channel, he can tell you about some fantastic results and some great things that are coming up in that space, which will really really impress anyone.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's fully public yet, but it's really amazing numbers.
Yeah, he loves to talk, so maybe he'll say something publicly as well. Let's see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think I will. The blog we discussed at the beginning of the session on optimizing network throughput, that would definitely be applicable for ANF and would even be applicable for any large Oracle system as well. And I put a link in that is a step-by-step procedure. So really the key document that we look at, the AWR report, there's so much, I mean, the AWR is so powerful. The link I put in here shows you how to go through the AWR report, and it will guide you on which VM SKU you really should be using on Azure. So your first step is always run the AWR report. That will guide you which VM type to choose, and it will guide you on your SGA size and your storage sizing. So that's a really good link. It's not an SAP specific one, but it's well worth. But what are customers doing generally? They are using the AMD or the Intel V5, the larger ones, sort of 700 odd gigabytes of memory, and also the M192 MS. Customers are above 25 terabytes tending to go to the large M-Series.
Yeah,
that's what we see.
But cool that they have a lot of choice here, especially for the mid-size and maybe lower size. AMD is a quite performant and cost-effective VM.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about the costs, but the feedback I get from customers is the AMD is very competitive price performance, feature-wise.
Yeah.
But again, always go through and check feature by feature. So, for example, bursting would be one I would check AMD versus Intel. Whether you because the bursting feature is actually quite powerful. It's not like we give you sort of an extra 10%. It's a lot more than that. So wait for my blog on bursting that's coming up.
Super.
SGA sizing, as mentioned, your AWR report is going to tell you what to do there. But we have multiple customers that run just great using a simple rule of thumb. Huge pages. If you try this without using huge pages, I think the whole system will collapse and melt down. You really have to use huge pages, and then set the SGA size to sort of 95% of the huge page size. Some people say, well, why not set roughly the size of RAM to huge page. You remember the Oracle Shadow processes have to exist outside of this space. So
They
you'd
need
never,
resources as well.
yeah, you'd never go above 75%
Right.
of
Yeah.
physical RAM. So I've there have been cases I've seen where that's really been a problem, where people have allocated way too much. You shouldn't do that. 75% is the maximum, but 95% of the huge page size would be about right. So the Oracle AWR reports are quite informative. If we had more time on the session, I'd show you some examples, but they show that if you increase your SGA, you're going to reduce IO. If you increase it a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. But then after a certain size, it says, well, if you made your SGA any larger, it's not really going to be any benefit. So that's roughly the point at which you would set the SGA. High availability, we have pretty good documentation for HA and DR, but fundamentally there's nothing unique or different with Oracle Data Guard on Azure. It's more or less what you would see with Oracle Data Guard on-prem. No big difference there.
So life is easier for partners and customers. Not big deal, yeah.
Yep.
Or learning curve, yeah.
So backup, your BR tools are still there the same way. I would really encourage customers to look at the Azure Backup Service. Again, it fully supports Oracle ASM. If there are any questions on this, if customers are having trouble getting this working, let me know. I know the backup guys pretty well. We can connect them and make sure that
the Azure Backup will work across the premium and NetApp disks.
Not so for NetApp. That's covered in the. I didn't put this into this presentation, but that's covered in the documentation that's going to be on the docs.microsoft site. Yeah, I didn't put that into this presentation. Final few words on Oracle ASM on Windows is not support. Oracle ASM on Windows is supported. It is not supported on Azure. One of the main reasons is that the SAP installer for Windows does not support ASM, unfortunately, today. So at the moment, Windows storage spaces would be the option to go for. But as I've said, very large customers are definitely consolidating on Oracle Linux, Oracle Database, ASM, and a top to bottom Oracle solution, which is very, very supportable for them. So more information. The link that I have given there is the main docs.microsoft that's being updated currently. The OSS note is the master OSS note from Oracle for Azure that's being updated. And do we have time to look at a case study, Warren?
Yeah, I think let's maybe just quickly switch, because it's always good to have a Woolworths is a huge customer, right? So
Woolworths, I think, is I don't know how many employees, but many hundreds of thousands of employees. I think it's the largest retailer in Australia, and this is a really good overview of their migration to Azure. And maybe I finish up the discussion because
right.
I actually asked the team there if we were allowed to mention it, but this is a customer that used to have HP Unix system, thousands of disks presented to it, and they moved from that to ASM, and that move to ASM has gone really, really well. Great performance and great feedback from this customer.
I'm just thinking, actually, somehow comes to my mind, ideally would be a kind of maybe even a follow-up session with you to maybe show practically some stuff, how to collect information from the Oracle report, how to extend the ASM, for example, how to do, I mean, these are great details. It takes time, but I think maybe a dedicated session to this with the kind of also practical doing it and seeing it and maybe discussing also from a performance and sizing definitely would make sense as one of the follow-up session. Yeah.
So shall we ask the audience if people want us to go through?
Right. So please, if you find it interesting and how to do the stuff and how to size it, how to execute, let's say ASM is one example, put us into the comment, and definitely we will organize with Cameron. I am getting asked those kind of questions also from the partners as well, not just the customers. So from my side, definitely an answer is yes. But if the follow-ups of the SAP on Azure YouTube channel are requesting it, definitely it's a even bigger push. Yeah.
So in my next blog, I'm going to have pointers to all the updated documentation. The updated documentation is going to have links on how to add space, how to teach yourself ASM, all of this, but sometimes people want to see demos. So if you want Goran and I to run a demo of all of this stuff and going through AWR,
just scream.
Comment and yes,
just scream in the comments. Yeah. Great. I think, I mean, we are kind of here, you come to an end, right? I believe in the presentation. I mean, it took a bit longer time, but honestly, every minute is kind of super useful. There are so many details, and they are, I mean, to get from Cameron in a summarized way is something what many customers or partners are really appreciating. Yeah. So it honestly, it will help me also in my customer projects when I run into the Oracle. Yeah. Learn a lot. So always keep in mind, use the ASM, definitely the latest Linux and database Oracle version as much as possible, unbreakable kernel and many more. Yeah. Thank you, Cameron, a lot. I hope we see each other afterwards. I'm definitely voting for those demo parts because I'm also being asked for. But let's see also then let the other people also put some comments there as well. Thank you very much, and it was really a pleasure to host you, and hope to see you soon in the follow-up sessions on this and other topics. All right. Okay, guys. So thanks a lot. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.